refused to fund my entitled sister's wedding. After my parents couldn't afford it, now my whole family is against me, and my sister just showed up at my door. Hey guys, I'm a 34-year-old software developer, and compared to the rest of my family, I make a lot more money. My mom's a retired music teacher, and my dad runs the local hardware store. I also have a younger sister, Catherine, who's 30. We haven't talked in 5 years because, honestly, she's a spoiled and entitled person. She's always been like that, and my parents never did anything to stop it. I put up with her for a long time, but 5 years ago, she brought her new boyfriend to Christmas dinner, which I was hosting. I had just moved into a new apartment and was excited to have everyone over. But, true to form, Catherine ruined everything by making snide comments about my place, saying it was small, old-fashioned, and in a bad neighborhood. She also kept bragging about her rich boyfriend and his huge estate. I finally had enough and told her that, unlike her boyfriend, I was paying my own rent without any help from our parents. I even told her that if she had such high standards, she could leave and never come back. They both took offense and left, and we haven't spoken since. My parents have tried to get us to reconcile, but I want nothing to do with her. Recently, I found out Catherine is engaged to that same boyfriend, and they're getting married in a couple of months. My parents, trying to keep up with the groom's family, offered to cover the cost of the wedding venue and decor. I think it's a dumb move because they should know my sister has expensive tastes, and it'd be way out of their budget. Plus, there's no way they could outdo the groom's rich parents. When my parents realized they couldn't afford everything, they came to me for a loan. I had to decline because of what happened years ago. When I was about to start college, they told me they wouldn't cover my tuition or any expenses because I was 18 and on my own. I was shocked because they had always supported me, but they said they wanted me to become resilient and independent, just like they had. They refused to take out a loan for me or borrow money from relatives, saying it was against their principles. I ended up getting my grandparents to help me with a student loan, which got me through college. I was mad at my parents, but eventually forgave them, though I didn't forget. Catherine, on the other hand, never had this problem because she didn't go to college. She always knew she'd either take over Dad's business or get married, which is exactly what she's doing. So now, when they asked me for money for Catherine's wedding, I reminded them of their principles and how they wouldn't borrow money for my education. They suddenly seem to have forgotten those principles when it comes to Catherine's wedding. I think it's hypocritical, and I'm not letting it slide. Some relatives say I'm being petty, but I don't think so. If I hadn't completed my degree, I wouldn't be in a position to help them out financially now. So what do you guys think? So when my folks came up to me asking for help, I reminded them of their whole spiel about loans and borrowing money, how it was totally against their principles and all that jazz. They were pretty dumbfounded because I don't think they expected me to actually remember all that, especially after so many years. But I did, and I remembered it quite well. After I laid it all out for them, they had nothing to say and just headed home quietly. I thought that was the end of it, but soon enough, a bunch of relatives started hitting me up, saying that I had humiliated my parents and that they were really upset. Apparently, my parents had been telling everyone that I had changed after coming into some money, and now I was lording it over them, despite everything they had done for me. I thought that was totally unfair and not at all what had happened. I just stood up for what I thought was right. So, I decided not to speak to my parents, because if they had a problem, they should have talked to me directly, instead of whining to everyone else behind my back. I also didn't bother talking to the rest of the family, because if they couldn't understand my perspective, there was no point. Also, I wasn't even invited to my sister's wedding, so I didn't feel the need to contribute in any way. For the past couple of days, I've had zero contact with my parents or anyone else from the family, and honestly, I've been pretty happy about it since I don't feel like I did anything wrong. But 2 days ago, my parents showed up again, and this time they were really upset. They told me that because of me, they had been uninvited from my sister's wedding. I couldn't figure out how I was involved since I hadn't been in touch with Catherine at all. Turns out, when my parents told Catherine they couldn't fund the wedding and needed her and her in-laws to pitch in, she lost it. She pressured them to find a way to cover the costs, because going to her in-laws for help at this stage would make her family look bad. Honestly, she had a point. If my parents weren't sure they could cover the costs, they shouldn't have promised to do so in the first place. Catherine is usually spoiled and entitled, but she wasn't wrong this time. In my opinion, she and her fiancé should cover the costs themselves since his family can afford it. But if my parents committed, they should follow through. She had every right to freak out, and I told my parents as much. I also told them that this mess was on them, not me, and they had no one to blame but themselves. Catherine uninviting them was a bit of an overreaction. But then again, what did they expect from her? She's always been like this, and they are responsible for how she turned out, not me. My parents just weren't ready to hear it, and kept insisting that if I had just loaned them some money instead of holding on to old grudges, none of this would have happened. I thought that was totally unfair, so I told them to leave, and they did. Now, the whole family seems to be against me, accusing me of being selfish and heartless. I really don't think I did anything wrong, but whatever. I refuse to contribute to my sister's wedding just because my parents can't afford it. Update 1. Hey, so I've decided to go no contact with my entire family. It's crazy, but both my mom's and dad's sides are united against me now, except for my grandparents. My mom's parents have passed, but my dad's parents are on my side. They've been trying to keep the peace, but even they're getting tired of the drama. It's like all the past differences in the family have disappeared, and now everyone's united in hating me. At least I did something good by bringing the family together, I guess. I've blocked everyone and want no more drama. Someone in the comments suggested that maybe everyone hates me because they're jealous, and I think that's pretty valid. Not to toot my own horn, but I'm doing way better than most of my family. Growing up, everyone told me to get a business degree and take over my dad's store, but I stuck to my guns and stuck with computers, which is now how I make my living. I'm way more successful than most of my cousins, and I think that bugs them. Their parents seem to resent me too. It doesn't make sense because families are supposed to be happy for each other's successes, right? But that's never been the case here, and it makes me sad sometimes. Still, I can't help it. Some people are just like that. I bet my parents are secretly happy that the family is against me, because according to them, I'm the villain in this story. Hey, so here's the scoop. My sister uninvited our parents from her wedding, and we haven't really talked since the last time they came over to blame me for ruining their relationship with her. Honestly, I still don't get what they're talking about. Anyway, our grandparents are on my side, and they haven't been talking to my parents either. It just shows how ungrateful my parents are, despite all the help they've gotten from our grandparents over the years. It kinda makes me glad I didn't help them when they asked, because they probably would have conveniently forgotten about it later. They're always taking everything for granted, and I guess it's time someone taught them a lesson, even if it has to be someone as terrible as Catherine. Update time. So, something really hilarious happened yesterday, but I was super busy and couldn't share it until now. Catherine came over to my place after work, which was a huge surprise because we haven't spoken in like 5 years, and our relationship is pretty rocky. I thought she was there to talk about her wedding, since our parents aren't invited, and she probably needs money. But she didn't start with that. Instead, she came to apologize for being a brat in the past, and said she's trying to make amends before starting this new chapter of her life. She even invited me to her wedding to make up for her past behavior. She said our parents never corrected her, so she thought her behavior was normal. But now she realizes she was terrible and wants to fix things, starting with me since I had to put up with her the most. I listened to her whole speech and told her it was cool that she finally apologized, but I knew there was more to it. She went on about how our parents had called me selfish and heartless for not contributing to her wedding, and she admitted they never helped me after I turned 18. They had promised to cover her wedding expenses, so it wasn't my responsibility to bail them out, especially given our bad relationship. Eventually, she got to the point. Our parents withdrew their funds because they weren't invited, and she was too embarrassed to tell her fiancé. She asked if I could help her out financially, saying she'd be grateful forever and would even sign a contract to pay me back by the end of the year. I thought it was interesting that she was willing to make it official, but I told her I needed time to think because our relationship is still strained. I expected her to understand, but she got pretty shameless and accused me of being difficult. Considering we haven't had any sort of sibling relationship for 5 years, that was rich coming from her. I knew from the start she was just there for money and didn't mean her apology. I told her she was just like our parents, selfish, and always looking out for herself. She started yelling, but I wasn't going to put up with that. I told her to leave, and when she refused, I physically escorted her out. She threatened to call the cops, but I didn't care. She left eventually, And while I was pissed for a bit, I now find the whole thing stupidly funny, and I'm not letting it get to me. Update 3. So, a couple of weeks have passed, and I thought our fight meant the wedding invite was rescinded. But today, I got an invitation to her wedding, and honestly, I don't even know how to feel about it. It's just weird. So, I decided to get in touch with her. At first, she didn't respond, but a few hours later, she finally called me back. She was pretty short with me on the phone when I thanked her for inviting me. I decided to ask her what was going on because, honestly, I was super confused. She told me that she genuinely meant her apology and was trying hard to be a better person now. She also mentioned that she'd sorted out the money situation herself and didn't need anyone's help anymore. She wanted me to know she wasn't just putting on an act to get on my good side because I was rich. She truly meant every word she said that day. She also shared that our parents had helped her realize how bratty she'd been in the past, and she was making a real effort not to turn into them. So I asked if she wanted to invite them to the wedding too. She told me that despite what they were telling people, she never actually uninvited them. She'd just been really pissed off at them because they'd put her in a difficult position. Apparently, our parents knew what my sister wanted for her wedding from the start, and she had warned them it was going to be pretty grand, and they might not have enough to cover it, but they were all confident and big talk about it. When it came down to it, telling her in-laws that our parents couldn't actually afford what they had promised would be super embarrassing. It wasn't just that they hadn't thought things through. It was their insistence on competing with her in-laws that really bugged her. Because she yelled at them, they decided she didn't want them at her wedding anymore and uninvited themselves. She never said that to them, nor implied it, but they jumped to that conclusion by themselves. Instead of confronting her, they talked to everyone else about it. I must say, it's pretty messed up for them to go around telling people their kids are terrible when they don't even bother to clear the air with us when they have the chance. Of course, after saying such awful things about us to everyone else, we're not going to be very inclined to sort things out with them. And even for that, they'd find a way to blame us. They constantly want to play the victim, and I'm glad my sister is finally seeing that. Catherine told me that the rest of the family hasn't ostracized her like they did with me, but she's still figuring out if she wants to invite them because they seem to be siding with our parents. With me, they were super nasty, but with her, they mostly tried to explain why our parents were right instead of outright accusing her of anything. I think it's because our parents are too proud to apologize, but not too proud to live off their kids in the future. Since my grandparents are no longer helping them, they need at least Catherine on their side, so they're keeping that door open. That's just my theory, though. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I know they're treating Catherine differently from how they treated me. It's sad, but I'm used to it. At least Catherine is beginning to see the truth now, and if she's genuinely trying to be better, I'm thinking of giving her a chance. After we talked on the phone, she apologized for throwing a fit the other day and said she'd really like me to be at the wedding, because at least someone from the family should be there. I haven't made up my mind yet, but I'm giving it a couple of days before deciding. It's not easy to fix a relationship that's been on the back burner for 5 years, but I don't want to be the kind of person who holds grudges forever. That'd make me miserable. I even talked to my grandparents, and they said if I decide to go, they'll attend too. They weren't sure before, but given the current situation, they might want to since Catherine is rethinking her relationship with the rest of the family and might not invite them. Update. So, yesterday, I actually attended Catherine's wedding. Well, attended might be misleading. I walked her down the aisle. Unfortunately, our parents didn't apologize or reach out to her before the wedding, so they didn't get invited. She was pretty upset about it a couple of days before and asked me if I would walk her down the aisle for emotional support. I instantly agreed because no matter what's happened in the past, nobody deserves to be treated like that, especially by their own parents, over some silly fight. I always knew it would be easier for our parents to cut me off emotionally since my sister had always been the golden child. But seeing this side of them, realizing they were too proud and egoistic to even fix things with the child they favored all their lives, was just low. They're part of the reason my sister was a terrible person in the past. Nobody bothered to correct her. As parents, it should have been their responsibility, but they never seemed to care how she was behaving and thought it was fine to just let her be. It turned her into a spoiled brat. I'm not saying it's entirely their fault, but they could have done something to prevent it. So Catherine asked me to walk her down the aisle, and I said yes. She was really thankful, especially since even the few family members she invited to the wedding had declined. It seems like everyone wants to support our parents and stay in the loop of all the drama. But hey, I managed to get our grandparents to come along. Before the ceremony, Catherine apologized to all of us, and her fiancé also said sorry for being a jerk to me back in the day. Catherine had told him the whole deal with her parents, and he assured her not to stress about money. He's got it covered. It worked out for them that way. She almost broke down before the ceremony because our parents weren't going to be there. But her fiancé, our grandparents, and I told her not to let them spoil her special day. I won't say everything is perfect now, but we're going to try to improve things for the future. I'm really ready to believe she's changed. When I met her yesterday, I genuinely felt she was sincere about wanting a fresh start. A lot of people might disagree with my decision, but I think I'm doing the right thing.